Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Anthropuzzled podcast. I'm your host, Abby Letzinger, and every 2 weeks we'll explore how anthropologists are forging unique career paths beyond the usual academic sphere. Tune in, get inspired, and start piecing together your own career puzzle within the world of anthropology. On today's episode, we have Melissa in Nile. She graduated with a bachelor's in archaeology and a master's in Egyptian art and archaeology, and works full-time as a museum educator. She also runs her brand, Melissa in Nile, on the side where she teaches the world about ancient Egyptian history, art, and archaeology on social media by making short-form content and live streaming. How are you doing today, Melissa?
We are doing great. Very excited to be here.
Awesome. So what is it that you do and how is it important and related in regards to anthropology?
I just love to teach people. And I think it reflects in both aspects of my life. I love history and archaeology, and I feel like people need to know more about it. I feel like when you're a kid and you're learning about history, you are getting very surface level stuff. And so I didn't want to do it in a formal academic setting. And so I really wanted to kind of have this sort of informal, fun situation. And so in my real life, I teach the public and school groups about the history of the city that I live in, and all the museums that I work in. And then with my brand, I teach my true passion, which is ancient Egypt. And I like to teach it in a really fun way with just the normal videos that you see kind of on TikTok every so often, though I love answering questions. It's like my favorite series is my Ask an Egyptologist series, where I can answer the really weird questions that sometimes people ask me. But then I get to live stream as well, and I get to play ancient Egypt history, archaeology themed games, and that will lead us down many a rabbit hole, depending on what the game is. And so I like to talk about all of these things in a way that's more accessible to people.
That's amazing. It's always good to have educators out there and also in ways that make it more fun to learn about, because if you sit in a classroom and you just have someone reading from a PowerPoint, it gets pretty boring and dull. But if you're live streaming and playing video games and you have different episodes for short content stuff, I think that's a lot more engaging, especially with how short people's attention spans are these days.
Yes, absolutely. And it's everyone learns differently. I am a very visual learner. And so it is one reason why I like doing the live streams and I like doing lectures, and all of my things are pictures. I'm like, you have to be able to see the objects and understand that. And it's just, I've met so many people who love this field and love learning about history, but didn't find the way that academia was sort of teaching them the best way. And as somebody who also struggles with memorization, art history was very hard for me. And the act of having to memorize all of the different, which for ancient Egypt, you don't even get the name of the author, the person who made it. But having to memorize all of that stuff was very difficult for me. And I didn't really think it was super necessary in a lot of ways. That is the standard practice for art history, but I can still recognize the thing even if I don't know exactly what dynasty it is just by looking at it.
I think it's a little bit different, but I took an art appreciation class.
Different, yeah.
Yeah, and we had to memorize what the painting was, who the artist was, what time period, if it was Renaissance or Middle Ages or something like that. I could never get it because it wasn't a topic that interested me. And it was never any cool paintings. There were the normal ones that are most popular, like the Scream, the Mona Lisa, whatever. I'm if it had been on something a little bit cooler and a little bit more interesting, I might have been oh yeah, I guess I should learn this. But everything else, I'm just and when am I going to use this again? I don't need to memorize it. In, out for test and gone.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that I just find very difficult, and it kind of separates the people that would want to do something like this and who are just not, they're not able to. I confess, I failed my first comp exam because of these memorizations. And I had to memorize every single image in an entire textbook. And I failed my first one because memorization is not my forte. It is part of actually a learning disability that I have. And it's just, that sent me down a bad rabbit hole. I was just what, can I not be an art historian because I cannot memorize every single object? Which of course is not nearly all of the objects that the ancient Egyptians had. Some of them, yes, are the most famous, the Mona Lisa, the Scream, things like that. And some of those pieces are the most random pieces ever, might not even be on display in a museum. Who knows? I don't even know. It could be in completely something that nobody knows about. And it's just like, I don't know why that has to be a parameter, I guess, in academia for art history at the least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, what does your day-to-day look like between being museum educator and doing your side gig of Melissa in Denial?
So for my museum educator job, it's very different because the museum, I actually work within a museum system. So there's 8 museums. And so my day to day is never consistent. It is always it's honestly like a week to week because it is I'm working on weekends. I'm not working on a couple weekdays. I have to do outreaches and school tours. I also ironically make short form content for them as well. So a couple days a month we are out filming and we're writing. And so it is very much like on a day-to-day basis, it's like making the museum look presentable, opening the register, working the shop, talking to people. But then I could be doing a tour, I could be running a school program, filming, I could be working a late night event, rentals, things like that. So there's never anything consistent when it comes to my museum educator job. But the day-to-day of my brand essentially fits right into the gaps my full-time job. So anytime I have a day off for my full-time job, it's full-time Melissa in Denial most of the time. And so a lot of it is because I don't have a lot of time on my hands, batch writing and filming the short form content videos that go out on my TikTok and then all my other platforms. And then I stream at night 3 times a week doing the video games discussions and lectures. But then I might have to be planning those discussions. I might have to be writing the lectures, making the PowerPoint. I also do guest lectures we're coming up on season 4. And from March to August, we do guest lectures. And so I have to be finding the guests and figuring out when we're actually going to schedule it based on my schedule, which I don't have months in advance. And so every day is very, very different. Nothing is ever consistent in my life anymore. And I have genuinely about 1 billion different calendars all over my house and on my phone to make myself sane because it does get a little crazy all the time.
Do you have a favorite series that you do for your brand?
Oh, so Asking Egyptologist is definitely one of my favorites because it ranges. Like, I mean, some of them are the common questions that I get, like, how are the pyramids built? I just had to do a video about that, which is always a tough one to fight with the conspiracy theorists. But I also like that I can find really random questions. Like somebody was like, were camels actually in ancient Egypt? And I was like, oh, I knew this one. They're not. They're not from ancient Egypt. Camels were brought in like way later. And so I ended up doing like a deep dive and I was like, okay, there are a couple, like, I mean, less than 10 depictions of what we think is a camel from the earliest time period of ancient Egypt, like a pre-dynastic period. And then they just disappear until like the Persians like bring them in. And so it's like, if you ever see a camel in front of a pyramid, it's wrong. Like it's something that's like really funny that someone just asked me. Someone asked me a question that I don't know the answer to, that I can't like answer easily in a comment. I go for it. But my true favorite series is my Dogs of Ancient Egypt series, which is essentially an extension of my master's thesis. So I studied ancient Egyptian dogs and their depictions. I collected a corpus of over 500 images, burials, artifacts, and I loved doing it so much. And the totally not subtle way of why I did this thesis is that I want to prove that ancient Egyptians were dog people and not cat people. And I'm pretty proud of myself, and I think that I can prove myself with this. But I love doing it because essentially I'm learning more from my thesis than I did when I actually did it 5 years ago in 2020. Because that was a collecting of the corpus, but I didn't ever get to really delve into any of the specific images in that 500. And so now a guest gives me a number between 1 and I think we're at like, and I've also expanded it since. I've added like at least 30 to 40 images since 2020. So you give me a number and I go into it and I find, it expands it because I actually get to learn what tomb is this image from? Who actually owned this tomb? What else is in this tomb? And how much can I tell about that person and why this dog might be depicted there? And so even though those might not get the most views, that is probably still my favorite series just because it makes it a little bit like worth it that like I spent 2 years doing this work. Hey man, I can still do it. I've considered like publishing short articles about certain topics and like things coming out, and I'm just like, I will hold on to this thesis like with my heart.
Is there any dog that's like super famous from Egypt?
There are a few. So there is a dog mummy. There's not a lot of dog mummies that have been preserved, but there is one very, very well preserved mummy that was found in the Valley of the Kings in a very small tomb. It was like a one room little square tomb. And there was a dog and a baboon. And that was literally the only thing in this tomb. Like it probably had been looted, both the dog and the baboon. The baboon had some wrappings like around its arms, but the dog was completely unwrapped. But he stands up straight. Like he literally, his little legs are completely straight, and he was just like leaning against the wall of the tomb. And he has hair. He's this like kind of blondish kind of dog. He's got this really long little tail, and he's at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, and he's a pretty famous one. Definitely like the best preserved dog mummy we have for sure, though we don't really have any idea like whose it is, or like no inscriptions, no other objects, like really nothing. Like it's definitely suspected that is those two are pets of some king buried in the Valley of the Kings, but there's very little information. And then there's another tomb in the Valley of the Kings for a man named Myher Pre, and he was found with two dog collars, which are these beautiful, really thick leather collars that have decoration. One of them has the name of a dog written on it. And so those I would say like are probably the most famous. There are a lot of very random images that kind of get spread around the internet and stuff. But I would say like in my mind, those are the most famous because they are just so well preserved and they're extremely unique. The vast, vast majority of my research is just like a dog sitting under the chair of his owner in a tomb. Like that is like, these two are extremely, extremely unique circumstances.
Now, when you watch movies that happen to depict something in Egypt, like The Mummy or The Prince of Egypt or anything like that, do you ever watch those movies and be like, that didn't happen or that's not correct?
All the time. It's very hard for Egypt because it has been depicted a lot in like movies and television, and there are very little accurate moments. The Prince of Egypt has always been one, like I've been obsessed with it since I was a very little kid. And taking out all of the biblical stuff that is in there, it is genuinely like a pretty well representative, like minus like you can see the pyramids from their palace and we can assume their new kingdom and it would be a different place. But like it's a relatively good representation, I would say, of like what Egypt was like at that time, like taking out all of that biblical stuff. And that includes like even the enslaved Jewish people, which we don't have as much archaeological evidence for. The Mummy is a one that everybody asks me about, and I never watched it until I was in college. So I have no nostalgia to carry me through the inaccuracies there. And that is what I always say to everybody. Everyone's like, but the Mummy. I'm like, no. Like I know all the actors and actresses are hot, but I have no nostalgia for this to like carry it through. And by that point, even though I hadn't done my master's, I still knew enough about Egypt to be like, what is going on? And the two big problems I have with the Mummy is like the scarabs eating people, because I have had little kids on tours ask me if scarabs eat people. And I'm like, no matter what, I do not want people to be scared of Egypt. Like, I don't want people to be scared of mummies. Like, mummies are just human beings from the past, like, that need that respect. And so I don't want people to be scared of that. I don't want people to be scared of scarabs. And then my other favorite thing about the Mummy is that the 1999 Mummy is based after the 1932 Mummy with Boris Karloff, which I love. And because it is so old, I mean, everything goes out the window. Like, I don't care at that point. Like, it's literally only 10 years after the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Like, it doesn't matter at that point. But I thought that the 1999 Mummy could make changes to make it more accurate. And they did make a lot of changes. But the one thing that they did not change, which was like my biggest pet peeve, is that the mummy's name is Imhotep. And his girlfriend, the girl he's in love with, is Ankh-Senamun. Imhotep is a name from the Old Kingdom. It is the architect of the Pyramid of Djoser, the first pyramid of Egypt, like before the pyramids of Giza, so old. Ankh-Senamun is Tutankhamun's half-sister and wife. from the New Kingdom, like thousands of years later. It's like if Brunhilde and Brad got together. Like it's think about how our names over time have changed. Like it is two completely different time periods. I don't blame the 1932 mummy for doing that. The 1999 mummy could have changed that. And that's like a super pet peeve thing. And most of the time I let a lot of stuff slide because I understand like marketing and I understand making things palatable to the audience and making things easy. Like Assassin's Creed Origins is a game that's set in Egypt and ancient Egypt, and they made so many things easy. They just copied over the same image on every temple you would go to. Like I don't expect them to go crazy. I don't expect them to go hire an Egyptologist to go write out actual hieroglyphs because a game company's not going to do that. But there are little things that I'm just like, okay, well, that was easy enough for them to just change. They could have just picked a different name.
With the whole scarabs eating people thing, I didn't have as much of a concern with that as I did with like Indiana Jones when the ants like
Oh,
guy into the anthill. I'm like, I guess I'm never going to Peru.
yeah, I will say, like Indiana Jones. That has my nostalgia. I am obsessed with Indiana Jones. I've always been, and so like I put a lot aside because it's Indiana Jones and because it's Harrison Ford. But that was petrifying. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in Indiana Jones that I'm like, never going near an anthill ever again.
So, what led you into this career path and how did you get where you are today?
My path was an extremely windy one, and I think it's a good example for some people who don't really know what they want to do with their life. And while it is still like it's a windy one within the world of anthropology, it is still a little bit crazy. Ancient Egypt was always my favorite when I was a kid. Prince of Egypt was one of the main reasons why I loved it. But I really never thought it could have actually been a career. Like I didn't hear about each actual Egyptologist. Like I didn't hear about how do you even get to that. So I actually went to college for creative writing because I loved writing stories and when I was younger, and archaeology was going to be my backup job, which is pretty laughable. And when I tell people that, they always laugh at it. And I was like, yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know. Like I didn't know what the field of archaeology was like at that time. But then as soon as I started taking classes in anthropology and archaeology and then eventually volunteering on excavations, like I was hooked. I was like, wait, this is it. This is what I want to do. Everything kind of flip-flopped on top of each other. I loved finding the artifacts and helping talk about these stories. And I joked like I would rather talk to the dead people than the alive people. Because technically my degree was anthropology with a concentration in archaeology. I did not pick the best school to go for archaeology, which I discovered very quickly when we essentially didn't even have like a full-time archaeologist at the university. We had a lot of retired archaeologists. So I ended up studying abroad at the University College London's Institute of Archaeology to literally get better classes. And that was where I held my first ancient Egyptian artifacts. I went on a 2-week excavation, and I also took a class in public archaeology, which at that point was not even really a course. Like it's still very up and coming, but that was all three of those were this big turning point of like, could I do this as a job? Could this be something that I want to do in the future? But I will say I didn't know where to go specifically after graduating from undergraduate because this new professor who had come into my university, who was a great inspiration and was an amazing mentor to me, kind of sort of was just like, well, you're going to go get your master's, right? Like it just, he was a PhD archaeologist. Like that was just the way. And so I was like, I guess that's what I'm doing because like otherwise I didn't have anybody really showing me any other direction. And so I took a gap year. I started looking specifically into Egyptology and literally applied to every single PhD and master's program in the United States that had Egyptology and got rejected from every single one except 2, one of which rejected me from a PhD and then gave me to the master's program in which I would have to pay $60,000 for 1 year. And then the second year would be free. And so then the only other one that I got into said, here's an assistantship. You don't have to pay. And I was like, I guess I'm going there. It was really like, that is the only choice. And I didn't really take the time to truly kind of think, is that actually what I kind of wanted to do. I went into it. I appreciate everything that I learned in my master's. I appreciate all the Egyptology, especially the language, like that I did get to walk out of there not well, but being able to read and write in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. But I very quickly realized I did not want to go forward and do a PhD. The academia was kicking my butt. My university did not really prepare me for a master's in this. It was really serious. And I suddenly was like, I can't do another 6 years of this. Like, I can't. I was not going to kind of survive. And I realized that I really kind of liked working in museums, and I wanted to kind of have that one-on-one with people, not behind like a professor's desk, and wanting to have access to everyone rather than just the people who are lucky enough to go to university and study those things specifically. And so graduating in a pandemic actually was a very big blessing in disguise, because it really set me on the path to begin my brand and then get a job at the same museum that I loved interning in graduate school, which truly that internship turned me on to public archaeology and what I do. And I sat in that internship and I was like, even though this is not Egyptology, if I could work here for the rest of my life, I would be very happy. And I'm very grateful to say that I might be working here for the rest of my life. I don't know yet, but I mean, we're in a couple years at least.
And not a lot of people can say that is, when they get into a job where they're like, oh yeah, I could totally work here for the rest of like me, I have not had a singular job yet where I'm like, yeah, I'd be down working here until I die. But it also comes down to like, what is it that you're doing? Do you really love what you're doing? Is it something that you have kind of been looking for but not looking for at the same time? Because I think a lot of the opportunities that we fall into is because we weren't looking in that specific direction, and it's something that what kind of was in our purview, and we're like, oh, that's something right over here, but I really want to focus on this path, and that just keeps getting closer and closer till you're like, oh, that is what I want to do, let me just go on over there. And that doesn't happen very often with individuals, or they don't know what to look for when that's happening.
Yeah.
Just want to, they're like, this is my plan, I'm sticking to this plan no matter what.
Yeah, I was one of those people that sort of halfway through my master's, I was like, I should not have done this. I should have done something general. I should have done museum studies. I didn't know that even the degree of public history existed at that time. And I was like, oh, I should have done public history, and then picked a university that had an Egyptologist, which there are several. And I was like, didn't think about that. And then I did know there is, I think, like University College London has a public archaeology master's. And then I think there's one university in the United States that has one too. And I was like, should have done that, but I'm not a quitter. And I was like, if I had not essentially taken the entire summer in between the two like years to literally collect all of my ancient Egyptian dogs, it just felt like so much waste. And I hated that. And I'm not a quitter. And so I was like, I gotta push through this. Like, I think I was like, I would feel so ashamed if I quit. And so I'm like, I'll go through it. That's fine.
I get that.
It's so hard because I wish that school, especially like master's programs, are not such a big financial commitment and like also mental load. It's something that like I unfortunately experience very toxic academia. I have met people who have not. They're like, oh yeah, I can call my professor by their first name. And I was like, if I did, I would be scolded. Like things like that. It's just like, I want people to be comfortable with it. And it's just, unfortunately, I feel like in certain fields, it's not. And it sucks.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for students who might be looking to go into a grad program based on your experience?
A lot of it is very much take your time to figure it out before you step into it, like truly. Because, and I know it's something that like most of the time people are like, you won't figure it out until you're already in school, like until you already get that experience. There are other ways. There are absolutely other ways. Doing internships and work like I did an internship at the Brooklyn Museum when I was in undergrad in the collections department for the Egyptian section. And while there was great things that I liked about it, I did not like curatorial stuff. I was like, I thought I would be touching more objects. I've been scanning slides of scarabs for days. Obviously that's an intern job, but I was like, I'm not working with the people designing the exhibits. I'm not really working, like I'm working on databases, and I'm like, really, I'm just in an office all day. And so it's kind of there are other ways to sort of figure it out without actually going to school. You can take classes like one or two without like fully committing into a master's program to kind of test the waters, because there's a lot of applications for anthropology and archaeology that, like, if you are the bigger science person, do GIS, do geographic information systems. You can work for so many more like fields with that. Even if you did like the archaeology part, archaeology unfortunately doesn't pay a lot. I mean, it will pay more if you have a GIS certificate, but it's kind of like you have to sort of figure it out. And I wish I had taken more time to really figure it out and done little internships. And I know it's a difficult thing to do, but I wish I had figured it. I wish I had taken a gap year before college, before undergraduate, because I went to a school that if I had gone to a different school that was better at archaeology, I very much was very interested in where my life would be now, because I don't think it would be where I am. If I had more experience, if I actually worked as a CRM archaeologist, which I've never, like I've joked, I've never been paid to be an actual archaeologist. I've done all the schooling, I've done a bajillion volunteer digs, but I've never been paid to be an archaeologist. I don't know how my life would have changed by doing those little experiences.
So, with the digs that you have done, have you gone anywhere interesting, like Egypt?
I have been to Egypt, but I have not excavated in Egypt. The unfortunate thing is Egypt is a pretty restricted country for excavation. You typically have to be a master's or a PhD student, unlike a lot of other universities where you can be an undergraduate, and they have like 50 plus undergraduates who go. More often than not, it's like less than 10 PhD students or master's students going to Egypt. So I have been to Egypt in 2024. It was a great trip I went on, but no excavation. A lot of my excavation has been in the Eastern United States, kind of mostly historical archaeology. I was really happy to do for when I was at University College London, I did an excavation on a Tudor site in the South Downs, which was a very cool excavation. And then I did my field school in Italy outside of Rome with the University of Michigan at the city-state of Gabi, which was a really, really awesome site. And I've also worked at a plantation site in the island of St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is when I was an intern for a public archaeology firm. And I was like, "You're going in an excavation to work with kids, right?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "How can I come?" And she goes, "Pay for your plane ticket." I'm like, "Sold. I'll figure it out." So yeah, I've worked at a couple, again, like mostly volunteer sites. And now as part of my full-time job, I do also help run the kids archaeology camp that we get to host every year, which is a lot of fun.
Have you ever found anything interesting in any of these digs that you've done?
You always, I mean, it's kind of the funny thing is that artifacts are always around, but it depends on what people find interesting. Everyone asks me, like, what's your favorite thing you've ever found? I have two answers, one for kids and one for adults. The one for kids is I found a die, so a half of a dice, in Rome, in Italy, and it was beautifully carved. It was this like perfect little cube, and it had these amazing little dots covered. And my professor, when he held it up, he said, "This might be the best one we've ever found here." And I was like, yes! I was like so ecstatic. But then technically my favorite find that I've ever found was a human jawbone at the same site. It was shoved under a rock. It had like 4 teeth in the back. And I pulled that thing out and I was like, oh my God, it's a human jawbone. And I was very, very close to like attempting to like completely switch fields to either be a bioarchaeologist or a forensic anthropologist. My school had two forensic anthropologists teach courses as like an adjunct, and I took 2 of them in undergraduate, and I was like, wait, this is awesome. I love this. This is like so cool. But then I didn't like the emotional aspect of it, because forensic anthropology is obviously solving crimes and working with dead bodies. And I was like, I would rather work with an ancient dead body that doesn't have a family that is looking for it, or things like that, kind of removing that mostly emotional attachment to the present. And so I was very close to being like, should I leave my undergraduate and go find a bioarchaeology class? Because I really liked working with bones and things like that. And so when I found the job, and I was really excited, I was like, oh, this might be my thing. And I never ended up taking any specific archaeology classes, but I have quite a few friends, and so we get to talk about it. So yeah, whenever kids ask me, I don't tell them about the human jawbone, just in case it'll freak them out.
But I mean, I think that's really cool because, when you go into like individuals who go into like forensic archaeology or go take like an osteology lab, you get to work with human remains. And sometimes you're like, wow, this was a person. And so sometimes it's weird seeing it on the outside.
It's very weird.
Finding an older one from like hundreds of years ago,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, wow, so this is proof that people resided here however many years ago. My favorite documentary is on, I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but it's called Unknown Cave of Bones. And
I've heard of this. I have not yet to watch it, but people have told me about this.
Yeah, it's so good. But because I think I've watched that documentary like 3 or 4 times. And it's just so interesting because you're like, the fact that we were peopling that long ago, but we were so different to where we are today, that it's just like mind blowing. You're like, man, I really wish I could go back in time. Not like physically because, diseases were a thing. I mean, it's still a thing, but it was way worse then. But just to be like a ghost or a fly on the wall and just be like observing all of that, because I would love to go see the pyramids getting built. That would be cool. And for all the conspiracy theorists who are like, oh, aliens,
I'm going to prove them wrong.
That's insulting to the people who built the pyramids.
You can say it out loud. It's racist. And I love calling people out for that it is 100% based. And it is not just like currently racist. It is based on racist theories that have spanned for like the past 100 or so years. People have asked me about time travel and like, what would you go back? And I was like, if I had the option of time travel, like the only reason I would do it is if I can be in a bubble in which I am not allowed to affect anything because I'm too scared of the space-time continuum. And so it's like, I literally would only be able to go in if I had a bubble that I am not allowed to break out of and just observe.
Right.
Like fly over or something. Just be present. I'm like, you're right. I never thought about the disease half of that, but I was like, I don't want to disrupt anything. I don't want to be responsible for that. That will make me very guilty.
Yeah. I mean, that's me like today. I'm like, I don't want to interact with people. I just want to observe people. So if I could go back in time and just observe and not have any of the negative side effects affect me, I'll do it.
A true anthropologist. They just like to people watch.
That's exactly. Now, with obtaining an anthropology degree, do you feel like it has broadened your viewpoint and perspectives on the world?
Absolutely, it has. I genuinely, when I was a kid, I used to think that I was like really, really different because I felt like I saw the world very differently from people, from my peers, from my family. I feel like I would always see like multiple sides of conflicts. I would feel empathy for people on like both sides of a war, and like I would also feel like very little, like I wouldn't be judgmental on like other people's cultural practices. And like when like some of my friends would be like, oh, that's so weird, that's gross, and until I went to college and started taking anthropology classes, I started learning about ethnocentrism and then these like concepts of not judging other communities based on our own. And I literally was like, oh my gosh, I've always been an anthropologist. Like I have always had that anthropological brain, that anthropological perspective. And so actually taking the courses and learning the words for all these things that I had been feeling was so validating. And it also coincided very nicely because my favorite Disney princess as a kid was Ariel, who is absolutely an anthropologist. And people like, I know they did this in Tumblr, like where they would associate jobs with all the Disney princesses, and Ariel would get really weird ones. I'm like, she's an anthropologist. Like I will fight to the death saying that that is exactly what she is. And that is how I always sort of felt about the world around me and was so curious about other cultures and other peoples. And so it really, college was nice because it just suddenly was just like, it's okay to have these feelings that you had since you were like in elementary school. People should feel like this. And a lot of people don't.
Yeah, I had a favorite professor back at the University of West Florida. Shout out to Professor Winburn. I took this Rituals of Human Remains class with her, and she had us do an assignment where we take something that is viewed as like normal in the United States and word it in a way that it makes it sound like some weird ritual. So
I
like
love that.
tattooing or going to the dentist to get a root canal or things like that.
Oh my
It
gosh.
it really makes you think about it that like when you put it, I wish I still had the paper. I think I did mine on tattooing and piercings. When you really think about it and you put it in like other terms, you're like, why would these crazy people have needles jammed into their skin and inserting ink? And then you think about other people's cultures and traditions, and it seems weird to you because
Yeah.
it's not normal, quote unquote,
Yeah.
your society, but that's normal for them. And that's the thing I always tell my family whenever we have to talk about religion, and I try to avoid it as much
Mm.
as possible. I'm just like, you guys say that this religion is the one true religion, but so are all these other religions saying the same thing. I'm like, could it be that all these religions are saying the same thing, but in a way that their people and culture would understand it? And they're like, well, that can't be it. Like,
This was one of my major like childhood thoughts because I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school my entire life. And literally I remember thinking like I felt like I was not as super strict, but like I remember like talking about LGBTQ issues, talking about abortion, talking about all these things. And I remember one thing about like, oh, if you are not Catholic, you don't get to go to heaven. And I remember internally as a child being like, that doesn't seem fair. I feel like everyone should be able to go to their equivalent of heaven if they are good in their own religion. Like I was having to make these like complicated webs in my brain just to like make it make sense. And it all opened up in college. I was just like, wait a second. It was the first time I had been away from like a predominantly Catholic school and I didn't have to take religion class like every single day. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much more. There's so much more out there and there's so much that people don't accept. And I'm just like, but it's all normal is nothing. That normal does not exist. Like even in the United States, the normal is different. And that's the like silly part about it. Even if your own town, your own church, I'm sure the normal is different. Like it's normal is just not a thing.
and I just don't see how people don't find it super interesting to be like, okay, we have all these different people on the planet with all these different languages, all these different cultures, and even within their own country, there are different dialects of the language.
Mm-hmm.
And you just like, I feel like if people really sat there and thought about it, they'd be like, how amazing and cool is that things have evolved so much that we have so many differences, but we're similar in a way.
I'm not even joking you. I will watch videos of like a Maori haka ceremony or Native American dancing, and I will literally start crying because I will be like, how did people in the past hate you? How could they hate this? Because it is like genuinely like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And then I think about like my own culture and like I don't have anything like that. Like truly, I think about stuff and I'm like, we have dancing in prom at 2000. That's nothing compared to these things. Like, and the other thing is as an American, it's also difficult because we are also some people in the country are very separated from what you would say their ethnicity, their deeper roots. So like my grandfather and my grandmother on my father's side immigrated from Hungary. They left a lot of those things behind. And I think about that sometimes where I'm like, we could be wearing these beautiful embroidered outfits of Eastern Europe. Like we could be eating all these amazing things all the time. We don't have that. And it's something that is just like, how could people have hated these things? Because they are genuinely the most beautiful things that I've ever seen.
There was this TikTok trend going around when K-pop Demon Hunters came out. How like Huntrix, the Demon Hunters, what would they have been if they were in your country? And then people would what they would look like from all these different cultures was
Oh
the
my
coolest
gosh.
thing ever. And I'm like, what are they going to do for the United States? Are they going to put them in Daisy Dukes and plaid shirts?
I mean, yeah, unfortunately. And honestly, I was literally watching K-pop Demon Hunters with my nieces the other day, and I love that scene in the very, very beginning where it shows. I think there's like 4 or 5 of the Huntrix, and I'm just like, I can't believe I missed this TikTok trend because that literally sounds genuinely amazing. But you're right, America would be it'd be a little sad, especially considering like when you think about the actual one that's in the movie, the last 3, you could see them in America. Like like there was like the 80s and the 90s and then like even the wartime had the like the victory rolls and stuff. I'm like that's what America's would have looked like too because that was then the time where everything culture started it didn't fully homogenize but it started to kind of spread to a lot of different places. And so I love that trend. I think that would have been That would have been so cool. I need to go look up some of those videos.
Globalization. But it was good because some individuals for the United States, they made our huntrix as Native Americans from back in the day. And I'm like,
Absolutely. Go for it.
Correct.
Have her wear a jingle dress. Kaya was my first American Girl doll, and I've been obsessed with Native Americans for a very, very long time. And so, like, yeah, put her in a jingle dress. I'm here for it. Totally.
Now, before we get to our final 4 questions, is there anything we haven't discussed today yet that you still wanted the listeners to know about?
I don't think so.
Okay, so we'll hop into the first question, which is, what is the best piece of advice you would offer to someone who's interested in your field?
I would say primarily kind of looking at archaeology and Egyptology. If you are interested, go for it. But understand the limitations of our field. Unfortunately, this field is about passion. It's not about money. If you are going into it because you think you're going to make money, you're in it for the whole wrong reasons. And it's so unfortunate. And I wish I could say it's going to get better, but at the moment, it's not looking great. If you don't have that passion for history, for archaeology, it's going to be really hard and you're not going to be happy. And that's just the straight of it. I accepted at a very, very young age that I would rather be happy in my job than make a lot of money. And so the biggest thing is, like, take the time to figure out what your career goals, what your life goals are. Like, it really, like, your career is your life in a lot of ways now. It is something that you will follow for a pretty long time unless you fully change fields. And while this is an awesome field with so many different wide ranges of uses that you can take something from your archaeology degree and you can use it somewhere else, all of this can also be a side hustle or a hobby. Like, it truly can. I have met so many amateur historians, amateur Egyptologists who do very, very good research, who write, who publish articles, get to go to conferences and do this stuff. But it's their amateur job. It's their second job after, like, a whole career and retiring in something else. These are things that you can still be passionate about. And there are plenty of people on social media, including myself, who want to teach you about this so you can continue learning. And I don't want that to discourage people, obviously, for going into this field. But if you realize that it's not going to align with your life, that doesn't mean you have to abandon it. You just need to take it to the side. I've met so many people who have, like, oh my gosh, I always wanted to be an archaeologist. I always wanted to be an Egyptologist. And I was like, that's okay. But did you ever continue reading and watching movies and documentaries? Like, did you actually continue to do that? Or did you always just kind of leave that as a pipe dream in the back of your mind? Still, if that is something you are very passionate about, figure out a way to use it in some other part of your life.
Yeah, and adding on to the take your time to figure things out portion, when you're doing that, also try a lot of things that get you outside of your comfort zone, because that's the only way you're going to figure out how, like, what you like and what you don't like. As someone who didn't do very much during my childhood, I really struggle with finding what I enjoy doing because I didn't do a lot. So I don't know. I have a lot of dislikes. I don't have a lot of likes. So I'm having to now, almost in my 30s, push myself out of my comfort zone that I've established for decades.
Yeah.
Finding new things in order to see, oh, do I actually like this? Like, do I want to go into a career in business? Do I want to work in an office job? Probably not. But at this point, I'm like, I got bills to pay. Things have to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So I might have to put career money before passion, but that doesn't mean you're looking for what your passion is. You keep doing small things on the side. So
yeah, that was actually one of the wake-up calls that I had. Was we had past grad students from our university come back and give lectures once a year. And one of the people who came back, we would always have, like, kind of more of a one-on-one with the students and with this person. And this person worked as a registrar in a university museum. And she talked about she did end up going, like, and getting her PhD, but she kind of talked about when she finished her PhD and she suddenly realized that she wanted a 9-to-5. She did not want to have to go home and start grading papers or working on lectures and writing and researching. And when she said that, it was like a light bulb went off in my brain. I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to go home and relax and play video games and do fun things. I don't want to have to go home and immediately have to start thinking about schoolwork. And even if the schoolwork is just grading other people's papers. And that was truly like, oh, like think about what your day-to-day life would be in whatever field it is. If you're going to be in academia, yeah, you do have a lot of free time depending on how many courses you're taking and or you're teaching, and then you do get summers. Like, do I miss having summers off? Absolutely, I do. God, I feel like I'm still like it's still only 5 years since I was in grad school, and I'm like, oh, when do I get to take off for summer? And I'm like, oh no, I have to actually go to work. But I get that 9 to 5. Granted, am I working technically 2 jobs? So do I actually have a 9 to 5 at the moment? No. But I've done this to myself and I have to live with it and I have to figure that out. And so balancing your life is possible, and figuring out whether or not you are comfortable with that 9 to 5 life or that office life. That office life is a big thing because I technically don't have an office life right now. And I had it for about 2 years before I took this job. And I miss a couple things about the office life. I really do. And thinking about all these, trying as many things as you can to figure that out so that you're not just throwing yourself into something that you're going to be miserable in for a really long time.
Yeah, it makes me think of this commercial that comes on. I don't know if it's like a Hulu commercial or it's on like Instagram or something, where this girl was just like, "Okay, it was, have a great rest of your day and I'll see you September 30th." And they're like,
I've seen this.
"What? Are you going on a trip?" She's like, "No, it's summer vacation." They're like, "No, we don't do that." And she's like, "Then what is there to look forward to?" And they're like, "Retirement."
Retirement. I literally was thinking of that commercial right now. I've seen that. I'm like, dang, because that first year that it happens, you're like, oh no,
Yeah.
what
When
happened?
do I plan my trips? Like,
You're suddenly like, there's not a natural vacation. I have to plan things. And it can be, but it also does open up where it's like, it can be any time of the year, but that also gives you a little bit of like choice paralysis. You're like, when do I go? Where do I go? Like, ah.
so what changes would you like to see in the industry of archaeology?
So pay is one thing, and I feel like that's unfortunately with a lot of fields. And this applies to both like the personal pay of the archaeologists, of field technicians, but also like the applying for like to get funding for museums and research that unfortunately has really dwindled in the past couple of years. And obviously there are a lot of external factors of this that are mostly out of our control, but it's something that has pushed away a lot of archaeologists and a lot of people thinking about going into archaeology, especially when it comes to like the people who are doing the actual excavation, like the field technicians, and the instability of their lives in that a lot of them are part-time and a lot of them it's a lot of travel. A friend of mine was a field technician, and it was just every week she could be driving 20 minutes, she could be driving 3 hours. And it just is like, it's a difficult job. I was once offered, even though I've never, again, remember, never done a field technician job. I was once offered a field technician job for $50 a day in this huge, and I would get housing, I would get like meals or something. And I was like, at the moment, that seems high. And then you're like, no, that is absolutely nothing. That's horrible. They were desperate. It was a massive CRM, cultural resource management site that needed to get done before this big high rise got put in. And they were desperate for people. And I was like, you better be paying me more than that. At the moment, I am very, very lucky because I work for a city government. And I am also full time. So the world of museum educators as well is unfortunately pay is very low. And most of them are part time and don't get benefits. And so a lot of my coworkers are part time and they have to work 2 or 3 jobs. And that's unfortunate because we are the frontline people. We are the people who are talking to everybody. And a lot of the superiors are not those people. Those are the people in the offices that are doing the planning and stuff. And so you would think they would need us. And when it comes to kind of like my industry on social media, I am usually always happy with the people I interact on social media, but I have seen a very unfortunate increase in the general public's distrust and sometimes hatred of academia. And I obviously don't have the best relationship with academia, but I was very surprised when I've done some videos on like pseudo archaeology and people who look at my degree and my research and say, you're hiding things from the public. You're not telling us the real truth. I know the real truth, or this guy who's not an academic knows the real truth. And they know more than us based on this internet research. And this is a mountain that I don't know how we are going to conquer. And I'm really worried it's going to get worse as social media. And unfortunately, I feel like AI is now coming into play, which is the next horrible step that people are like, why don't you can just use AI for like this tiny little thing. I'm like, no, no. Like I've made a blanket no that I won't use it for literally anything because it's ruining certain parts of my field and that sucks. And so I want people to understand that like all archaeologists want to do is share their knowledge and their research with the world. And we want to talk to you and we want to have an even discussion with you. But it's a really hard thing to kind of squash because I think it's getting exponentially worse on crazy internet forums that you stumble upon once in a while.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side, what do you just absolutely love about your job and what you do?
Oh, I love artifacts. I love being able to hold or see, if I can't hold it, at least I can look at it behind plexiglass or a picture of something that someone 100 to 1,000 to 5,000 years ago touched and held in their hands. And I love to kind of just build that story of how they made the artifact, what they used for it, like why they made it look this certain way. Like, especially Egyptians, everything is functional. It's kind of the difference between art and artifact. Like, a lot of people will like, oh, it's all ancient Egyptian art. And I'm like, no, everything from ancient Egypt is an artifact because everything has a function. Even if the function is, it is beautiful. That is its function. And so having like to hold one of those pieces and think about where they got it from and maybe why they threw it away or why it's found in that way is just like absolutely remarkable. And I love stumbling upon really random stuff. Like I literally just came upon an ostraca, which is either a piece of pottery, a piece of broken pottery, or a piece of limestone that somebody painted on or wrote on. Typically in Egypt, but there are also ones in like the Near East. And I found this one that has a drawing of a tomb, and it has these little sort of genuinely sort of stick figures of these stone carvers in the tomb. And I've seen other ones of like a tomb and a burial, but I've never seen this one before. And I just love that I stumbled upon it on Facebook and I was like, where is this piece? Where can I get more information? Where can I take a picture? Like, I need to share it. And that is one of my series I do on TikTok, which is Artifact Insight. And I do it based on if you ask me about an object specifically, or whenever I go to a museum, I just film the stuff that I like, that I think other people will like. And so I just love thinking about like all the stuff that I have in my room. What is going to happen to that in the future? Will that become an artifact? I mean, it is technically an artifact because the technical definition of an artifact is anything that a human has made, used, or changed. So I always tell the kids when I do lessons, technically everything's an artifact. And then they always look at me and they're like, am I an artifact? And I'm like, let's not go into that. I don't know.
And I think it's amazing what museums do in, trying to educate the public. And I wish there was more public and federal funding for it.
Yeah.
What happens to all these artifacts and pieces in a museum when a museum gets shut down? Does it get transferred to another museum? Does it get distributed somewhere else? Like, what happens?
Yeah, it is a very daunting task. I only know of really one museum that has done that, which was a museum I think it was in the 90s or early 2000s in Niagara Falls, shut down. And it was sort of not really a great museum. It was not a Ripley's, believe it or not, but it was kind of like a Ripley's, believe it or not. It had a very random selection of stuff. And I only know about it because it had a semi-large Egyptian collection, and they sold off all the artifacts, which, like, for the most part, museums don't like doing that. Deaccessioning is a very, very difficult thing. You have to have so many parameters. And one of the big things is that you can't sell off artifacts to like pay for a renovation, or in maybe their case, pay for bankruptcy. But I think they did it. But it also did lead to a really interesting discovery because a coffin and mummy that was in that collection, when the entire Egyptian collection was purchased by the Emory Museum, or the Michael C. Carlos Museum at Emory, and it apparently somebody had already suspected, but it turns out that maybe this coffin and mummy was the mummy of Ramses I and was thus the only Egyptian pharaoh to actually leave Egypt. It's not like 100% confirmed, but it was repatriated back to Egypt. It's in the Luxor Museum now, but it is like that museum shut down, and that led to that happening. It led it to actually going to real Egyptologists at the Michael C. Carlos Museum. But that's a huge, terrifying question. What would happen? And it just, unfortunately, the fear in me is that all of it would go into private collections, which I'm not like the biggest hater of private collections, but I am the biggest hater in that if it goes into a private collection, it probably goes behind closed doors and no one's going to be able to learn from it. And the possibility that that person is not going to take good care of it because they don't have access to all of the things that museums have access to. And that's a terrifying thing to think about. That a piece that was very famous and on the walls of a museum could just be shuttered away and no one would ever see it again, pretty much.
Final question to you is, where can listeners learn more about you and what you do?
So I'm pretty much on most social media under Melissa in Denial, and that is DENILE. I mainly post short form content on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And then I stream archaeology, Egyptology, and history themed games 3 times a week over on my Twitch. And I also have a Patreon exclusive podcast, Voices on Denial, where I tell people the stories of ancient Egyptians and then Egyptologists twice a month.
Okay, cool. Well, it was super fun chatting with you. I loved all this new stuff that I learned about Egypt and the number of dogs that you the number of photos of dogs that you have found. It's insane. Like, I'd be looking at it, I'd get to the point where I'd be like, is this the same dog? It's like when they have like the whales and you have to like identify dolphins. You're like, is this the same whale dolphin thing?
A friend of mine is currently in Egypt and he sent me a text and he was like, hey, do you want me to like get any footage for you? And I was like, that's so kind. I think I'm good. But if you see a dog, take a picture of it for me, like just in case. And he sent me a great picture of a stela that's in the Grand Egyptian Museum, which I went to when I was there in 2024, but only half of it was open. So he was able to see it when it was fully open. And he sent the picture of me and I was like, I think I have that one because I have again, I'm visual. I kind of know every single one. Like, I'm pretty good. But I was like, I think I have that one, but that's a way better photo because I think I just have a drawing. Because unfortunately, a lot of things I do are just drawings, like from textbooks or from a tomb or objects in the Egyptian Museum. And to top it all off, my favorite part about that entire project is that, yes, I have over 500 images of dogs, but I also have over 100 individually named dogs that get personal names, which is why the Egyptians were dog people and not cat people, because there's only 2 cats with personal names and there's over 100 for dogs. Absolutely. Take that.
Thank you again so much for coming on, taking the time out of your day. It was a lovely discussion and I had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. I had so much fun.
All right. Well, then you have a fantastic rest of your night and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Anthropuzzled. This show was produced by me and distributed in collaboration with the American Anthropological Association. A special thanks to Cheyenne Brewer for editing the website, L. Akers for the incredible logo design, and to Anthropuzzled's intern for the episode descriptions. The music is courtesy of Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear of Sound and Picture. If you have any questions, you can reach me at abby.letzinger@anthropuzzled.com or as Anthropuzzled on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time.